Hello again, everyone. This is another lesson in my New Testament is Fake recording titled Kings of the Earth. From Genesis chapter 3, verse 21, it says, Unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skins and clothe them. From this we have been taught from we were children that God was doing a sacrifice here at the start of mankind, I guess, in the Garden of Eden, to clear up the sin of Adam and Eve. And so he performed the first lamb sacrifice or animal sacrifice. Now, it's kind of funny when I think of it that they didn't really say he performed some bull sacrifice. It's just a lamb. Even though the text does not say anything about God killing or God making a sacrifice or any animal being mentioned in the verse. But this is used to talk about the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, the Hebrew Messiah from the Roman Hebrew kingdom of the FT, what I call FT, the Fairy Testament or the New Testament or the Fairy Tale Testament of the Roman Hebrew Empire, because it was no longer a Hebrew empire like it could clearly be seen to be in the days of the Torah. But at this time, in New Testament times, the Romans, as you can go through the book and also see in the history of the time, the Romans were even selecting the priests who would be high priests. So this was no longer strictly a Hebrew empire. This was a Roman Hebrew Israelite empire that we're reading about in the New Testament. As I talk here about the kings of the earth, I understand that, in my own mind at least, all the kings of the earth should have been present to witness the crucifixion of Jesus, or a representative of all the kings of the earth, all the rulers of the earth, should have been present themselves, or a representative should have been present to witness the crucifixion of the Son of God that was going to bring the redemption of mankind from the Father in heaven. Because if this is something that's going to clear up all the problems on earth and all the sins of earth, and once that happens, then the whole earth would have to get back in line to being this glorious, wonderful earth that earth was before all these laws that many people don't even agree with, and before all the unrighteousness of earth. This would then mean that the kings of the earth, the kingdoms of the earth, the rulers of earth would have to then run their kingdoms or their countries in a different way to reflect the changing of mankind and the return of mankind unto a blissful pre-Eden fall kind of setting. Because we know that the way earth operates today is happening because man fell, as we like to say. So if this change is going to happen, it cannot ignore the rulers of earth. And you cannot get rulers of the earth to make drastic changes if you don't lobby for things, have great meetings. You hear of the G20 summits, and you hear of all these different summits and the climatic conferences that they're having, global warming, and different moves in politics and dealing with war and the economy worldwide, and biological this, geographical that, everything is always discussed and talked about. You've got this whole NATO and everything like that, right? So politics just have people coming together all the time to discuss great changes in a country or across the world. So how is it that the greatest change of all, that is the reversing of sin that happened before any king lived on earth and before there was any country on earth, how is it that all this is going to be corrected and the kings of the earth just don't know about it in order to play a part in it, or at least take a look at it, to have conferences and make decisions and vote about it and so on? Because if God is going to send the king of the earth, who they say is Jesus, so the Father is dethroned right there, how is it that the other kings are not notified? Because in a country, if a president or prime minister is going to do something drastic, something big, the other people in his cabinet, the other people in the government that work in that land usually know about it, and they have a lot of meetings about it and decide. No great decision is going to be made unless it happens that way. But God is going to do a very great thing through his Roman Hebrew son, Jesus or Yahusha, and does not inform the other rulers of the earth, who, according to the teaching in the New Testament, the people on earth who are ruling on earth get their power from God, and God has put them up. And you can find this in the teachings of St. Paul, this Apostle Paul, who by now, as I told you before, should already be roasting in hell. And since it's, it should just be very clear through his teachings that he's already turning over, searing and roasting and frying in the flames in hell. But even he is saying we should be obedient to our masters and so on. So that's definitely going to include the people ruling over you in whatever country you are, especially since there are so many Bible-based countries on earth now. So God is doing something where he has all these rulers ruling under him that are Christian leaders of Christian-based countries, and they could not be Christian leaders if they did not come out of Jesus, the ruler or leader of Christianity. So he's setting up Christian rulers and Christian nations, and he just goes straight to Calvary and does not inform the Christian rulers of the earth or the future Christian rulers that this is something they need to pay attention to. I'm dying on Calvary as I was commissioned by my Father to do. If you look across the earth, in history as well as now, you will understand one very clear thing in relation to this lesson. It is that the rulers of the earth, they will talk about their economy and the climate here and there, and the melting of glaciers and war and viruses, disease-controlling viruses from breaking out and just going haywire and so on. They talk about all these things, and job creation and so on. And they'll make that a very vocal thing. They never ever talk about Jesus dying on Calvary. Christianity is used to rule many countries, but they never come together. I'm not talking about in church now, but they never come together and just formally discuss how Jesus died for America, or died for Canada, or died for Jamaica, or died for Sweden, or died for Peru, or died and gave his life on Calvary for the salvation of Nigeria, or for England, or for Iran, or for any such place. They just don't do this. Now, a president might be a Christian, a prime minister might believe in Calvary, but they do not make this an official thing. Yet, Calvary is, according to the Bible, one of the most pivotal happenings on earth, according to the most popular book on earth. But the kings of the earth, they just rule and reign, and they don't care that way. They discuss everything else formally and globally. Overpopulation of the earth. But we don't discuss Jesus like this, dying on Calvary. China, they say, was up and running when the Hebrews were getting their laws through Moses at Sinai. But China does not seem to care about Calvary the way that you will find a pastor in a Christian church caring about Calvary. I mean, and you can pick the other countries, Korea, just name them all out. The kings of the earth, even when you deal with like Persia, since that's an older name than Iran. And they were certainly up and running before Rome was doing their mighty things. And you've got Greece and so on. They don't deal greatly with Calvary the way you would find a Christian ministry or a pastor, or even in this case here, a Hebrew Israelite camp that believes in the Messiah. They don't talk about it like this. Yet these ancient nations, who some have changed their names today, they don't talk about being a witness of Calvary at the time when the Son of God died on Calvary to redeem mankind and to redeem Persia and to redeem Greece. You understand what I'm saying? That in their writings and in their religious beliefs, they do not have a strong push like the Hebrew Israelites or like the Hebrew Israelite Christians of the New Testament in talking about how Calvary has done something magnificent to bring us back to Edenic times. Because nobody cares about the greatest thing that the Creator did through His Son Jesus to restore mankind. Because Calvary is a fake, and the kings of the earth do not believe in Calvary. How can God do something through Jesus on Calvary or through Yahushua? And the kings of the earth just ignore Calvary so well that even 2,000 years later, God has to now go back to working with the Israelites in some prophecy that has yet to be fulfilled. To come back and start slicing people with his sword and his garment in blood, drenched in blood, as he slices people and slashes them in some Halloween sequel from the east all the way over to the west, destroying people. Why? Because they did not believe in his Calvary that was a master plan set up by the God of Eden, who supposedly did an initial sacrifice of the Lamb of Calvary in Genesis chapter 3 verse 21, and who slew that Lamb of Calvary before the world even began. God has a master plan, this Creator, the God of the Hebrews, Yahweh. a master plan that he even executed before he created man, to slay this lamb from the foundation of the world, and showed that this plan was really true by killing this lamb in Genesis 3:21. And the Creator did all of this, and 2,000 years later after Calvary, and thousands more years after the plan was concocted in the mind of the Creator before the world was created, the kings, the rulers of the earth, the presidents, the prime ministers, the chieftains, the queens, the kings of the earth, they do not do anything about receiving this salvation of Calvary and doing everything to make sure the world returns to an Edenic state. Calvary and the New Testament with this Messiah is fake. It is just another book when you say New Testament. It's just another book. All the Hebrew rulers that were scattered from captivity times and even fled from Jerusalem, AD 70 time, when they went over the world and ruled their people in smaller groups, they don't even bear witness, such that the move now is coming stronger and stronger, that they're the Hebrews, but it is weaker that they believe in Jesus. So there is now a messianic push to include Jesus. Because these Hebrews that you say ran into Africa, apparently they didn't really believe in Jesus, so that they believed in Jesus, their supposed Messiah, when the Europeans came later in the 1500s, 1600s, and on 17 and 1800s to introduce Jesus to them and brought them a New Testament. And then sometimes, like in videos I already showed, they rejected the Calvary Messiah that is supposedly their New Testament Messiah, fulfilling prophecies from David and from Isaiah and so on. They rejected this Jesus of the Hebrews. These Africans who are supposedly Hebrews rejected the message of their Calvary Messiah when the Europeans presented them, so that the Europeans had to resort to trickery in order to conquer them, and force them with trickery, and even by the slicing of the sword, force them through domination and blood and warfare to accept Jesus. And so they accepted the salvation of their Messiah that was prophesied by their Hebrew prophet Isaiah and so on. Hebrews naturally rejected their Messiah. They rejected him, so they ran from Jerusalem, and they rejected him when they were settled in Africa, and the Europeans forced them by the sword to accept Jesus. And you're telling me this is God's master plan, to send Jesus to die on Calvary? And notice that God's master plan did not just introduce Jesus coming to you to give you life. His master plan included his lamb coming to die first on Calvary and then give you life, supposedly. Which means for God to give you life through his son, Jesus the Messiah, Yahushua, he had to first kill the Messiah to give you life. So the prophetic message there is that Yahweh from the Old Testament has to kill first in order to give you life, as a prophecy to show you that you have to die first to receive Jesus. And so Africans died first before they were forced to believe in Jesus and accept him in Africa at the hands of the European. They had to die first to receive Jesus and keep their life. Like Jesus had to be killed first and died on Calvary before he could give you life. Now the kings of the earth should have witnessed Calvary by sending their delegates to witness what happened at Golgotha. That didn't happen. There was no representative all over the earth to go back to their countries all over the earth and to say it is a true thing. God sent his son and he died in Jerusalem at Calvary. Instead, the Romans had to send people like Paul and others to go all over the earth. And after Paul died, to send them the other missionaries all over the earth to spread the message of Jesus, to convince them about a Messiah who died, that the people can no longer verify because the happening had already supposedly happened, even though there are many people on earth proving that Jesus Christ never even lived. The kings of the earth did not have any of their delegates returning to their lands across many waters, saying, yes, God sent his son, and we saw with our own eyes he died from us. We can now head back to an Edenic lifestyle. Instead, the kings of the earth had to continue to prepare for war and battling against the demons that were coming to attack them all over earth. Some just straight up said, we don't want any of this modernizing. We're going to run deeper into forests and wilderness areas and just live in what we would call today primitive manners, because we don't want this modernizing stuff with war and so on. It destroys us. Jesus also did not go visit all the kings of the earth to say, I am here now and I'm going to die at Calvary. I understand maybe some of you can make it, but that's why I came to visit you, to let you know I am God, or I am God's son. Here I am. I'm going to die on Calvary for you. None of that happens because the New Testament is a fake. All this New Testament stuff with Christ dying on Calvary happened in Jerusalem in one spot. God did nothing to let the kings of the earth know that my son is here now, and he's going to die for you on Calvary. Come and see this. But when they're discussing climate changes and warfare and so on, and even when they want to get together for war to go after Iran or Syria or Saddam Hussein or whatever they're doing, there's all kinds of big meetings and different countries come together and their leaders meet together. And this big thing is all over radio, TV, internet, to let the whole world know we're about to go to war, and this is the reason why. But God is doing the greatest war against evil and against supposedly Satan on Calvary, fighting against sin on Calvary, and sin is a worldwide thing. And Jesus doesn't go and inform all the world, and God doesn't go and inform all the world that now I am clearing up the sin that happened in the Garden of Eden. I am God, and I'm letting the whole world know with all its kings, I'm clearing up the Edenic fall. The New Testament Calvary story is fake. God, or the Creator, is not a part of this New Testament. Look at John chapter 21, verse 25. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written, every one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that should be written, but they sure could have written one book for every person, for every country rather. Or they could have sent out a book to every country. They didn't do it. Instead, as we read history, the message of Jesus was carried to every country, not by a book, but by a sword, by an army. Instead, as we read history, the message of Jesus was carried to every country, not by a book, but by a sword, by an army that was out to steal, kill, and destroy. But isn't there a verse in the New Testament that says Satan goes about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he might devour? See, the New Testament is a big trick. Now in Acts chapter 3 and verse 21 it says, whom the heaven must receive until the times of restitution of all things, which God hath spoken by the mouth of all his holy prophets since the world began. This stuff was spoken by prophets since the world began. But you've got kings of the earth, rulers of the earth, from ancient times until now, who do not believe anything in Calvary, and some do not even believe in a Hebrew God named Yahweh, and have been like that for thousands of years. So even before Jesus came to die on Calvary. Some rulers of the earth, some people live on earth today, who do not even know a story of the Garden of Eden, of a person named Adam, and sure don't know anything about Jesus dying on Calvary. But this was spoken to prophets since the world began, and they never heard such a message. But wherever you find Christian armies throughout history going, the message of these holy prophets of Jesus arrives. So is God doing this? Or is it armies responsible for spreading? We hear of the missionary armies that went all over to America, to Africa, everywhere. And the message of this Hebrew Savior arrives from Calvary. Can you understand what I'm trying to say? The kings of the earth know nothing about this until other kings send their armies there with books and missionaries. The New Testament is fake. So when you're learning in your Hebrew camps, you are being lied to. There's no truth in this Hebrew Israelite Messiah. Look at Acts 17 verse 31. Because he hath appointed a day in the which he will judge the world in righteousness by that man whom he hath ordained, whereof he hath given assurance unto all men, in that he hath raised him from the dead. So apparently God will judge, the Creator will judge all men. All men. And the kings and leaders of every country, as well as all men, never got to witness Christ dying for them. You understand, religion is such a big thing that with all these religious wars for thousands of years, you cannot just be God and say, I'm going to introduce my Hebrew Israelite Messianic religion with a Calvary death, and not let all men know this is coming from you. Because we see that when religions are coming into an era, the people with their other religion before don't like it. And it causes war, animosity, fighting, all kinds of stuff. So if you are the Creator and you know that, why don't you let them know that you are the Creator and you are introducing this Messianic Calvary religion, so that the men on earth who you have created will not resist it, because they know this is the Creator who wants them to accept this religion and this sacrifice in Calvary. But he's going to judge all men, yet all men have not been told about this by the Creator. And still today, there are still many men who do not know about this Jesus. They are still locating new people on earth who don't know anything about Jesus. But for 2,000 years, God has a problem letting all men know about Jesus. If Bibles are not printed, all men will not read of this Jesus. That means if somebody who has the power to publish Bibles don't do that, the Creator cannot let all men know. If missionaries are not commissioned and be sent out by ruling governments for the past hundreds of years, the Creator cannot possibly have all men know about his Son dying on Calvary to redeem men. So the Creator is limited. Now you understand, if the ruling governments that sent missionaries for hundreds of years all over earth on ships and so on, along with the swords by their sides, if those ruling governments had been conquered, taken over, defeated, then the Creator's message of his Son dying on Calvary would have stopped reaching these other nations. So God would have failed. And now we're understanding that even today, more and more people are waking up to this whole Jesus and Bible thing being a trick. And they're pulling away from the message of Jesus. So God is still failing to reach everyone through his Calvary message anyway. The New Testament is fake. Romans chapter 3 verse 19. Now we know that what things soever the law saith, it saith to them who are under the law, that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. So all the world somehow was made guilty before God by what they tell us is a Torah, or a universal law, an initial law that created the whole world and everything. Because he used wisdom to create the world, and wisdom is Torah. So there is this universal law, and all men are made guilty by that according to the New Testament. But God, who made this universal law to govern man's life, does not make sure that Jesus is universally known. Such that even today, tactics are being used cleverly and funded by billions and billions of dollars of money injected into religion to spread the message of the gospel. So if money was not printed, the gospel would not have reached as far as it has reached on the earth. So God had to sit down for thousands of years to wait until people invented money in order to push the gospel around the world. And notice that it is not the Hebrew Israelites who pushed the message of Jesus around the world after he died 2,000 years ago. It was the Roman Empire who pushed the gospel around the earth. So if Jesus is the Hebrew Messiah sent based on Hebrew prophecies from Hebrew Israelite prophets from the Old Testament, like Zechariah and Isaiah and David in the book of Psalms and others, why did the Hebrew Israelites not be the ones who were responsible for spreading the message of the Messiah, that is their Messiah from Judah, all over the earth? Why is a Roman Empire spreading the message of the Hebrew Israelite Messiah across earth? Why is somebody else responsible for that? Because the Hebrew Israelite doctrine and teaching is fake, just like the New Testament, and Hebrew Israelitism is spread by the Roman Empire. Fact. History. Hebrew Israelites, Jews, Judaism, Torah, what other words can I think of, or terms, whatever else you can think of along those lines, and that which is called Bible and so on, Tanakh, biblical apocryphal writings and so on, all these words and terms and movements and so on, and Christianity as well, all of this stuff was spread around the time of the Babylonian Roman Empire, such that even the Torah was put together in Babylon. You understand what I'm trying to say to you here? Is that the God Yahweh was not pushed around the world in a Hebrew Israelite kind of way in the time when Moses was said to have been lived, or when Abraham lived, or when the first Israelite lived, and so on. It was spread around the world and began to be popularized. All of this stuff called Torah and Israelite and so on was spread around the world and started to be pushed around earth at the time of the Babylonian giving way into the Roman Empire. I mean, later Babylonian times, right? When Israel is going into Babylonian captivity. So you're talking somewhere around 600 to 500 BC, coming up to the Roman Empire days. That's when they really worked out all of this stuff, and the Torah was put together there. When the northern kingdom went off into Assyrian Empire, and the southern kingdom, Judah, went into Babylonian Empire. After that, Torah began to be, it began to come together. And the Babylonian Empire, it's like the whole thing was kind of coming together there. When the Babylonians were going down, and the Romans were coming into the picture now, taking over from the Greeks, and they put their stuff together there, and there was a lot of traveling between the Roman Empire, Jews as they call them, or Israelites if you want to call them that, but there was clearly a mixture there, because there was clearly black and white people there, and they were going back and forth between Babylon and Rome, and creating the Torah. And then what is Torah and what is you call Hebrew scrolls began to be popularized. And you notice when it really took off? After the Greeks went into Egypt and took over Egypt. Now they had the full source of stuff that they can have all these writings and wisdom and so on to really put the whole thing together and make a fancy book. The Torah and the New Testament came afterwards. But like I've told you before, they were written to operate as one. The Torah was written to create the New Testament doctrines. Because you have to build the foundation or the structure upon which a New Testament could thrive for 2,000 years. That's why Paul, frying in hell, said that the Torah was written for our learning and our understanding. In other words, the Old Testament is the foundation of the New Testament. That's the understanding you need to have. Is that you cannot just run and build the New Testament fully like that. You have to sit down and create the foundation upon which the idea for the New Testament will be made, will be built on. So you construct the foundation of the New Testament, but you wouldn't call it foundational. You would say you construct the Old Testament in order to build the rooms on top, which is the New Testament. The whole thing is one book. Just like the apocryphal books are a part of the whole structure as well. But they didn't take off and sell as well, so they weren't included in the main canon, the main body of the whole book. Because they were working out what should be included. And like Dr. Ben even pointed out, Genesis was not even the first book, but they couldn't start Exodus as the first book. So then they created and put in a Genesis and gave a nice story and put that as the first book. So look in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 4, and then I have one more verse after this. It says, "In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them." So the God of this world, who the New Testament will tell you is Satan, has blinded the eyes of all the men on the earth, all the people on the earth. But God, through Christ, has done nothing through sending Christ to give sight. So imagine that. The God of this world, who the New Testament says is Satan, can just so easily, through one act in the Garden of Eden, blind every man on earth so that they cannot see spiritual truth anymore of God. And has shown himself to be more powerful than the Creator, the God of Israel. Why? Because through one act, this Satan serpent, as the New Testament will lead you to think, does one act in Eden and get them to fall and blinds everybody on earth. Even people who aren't born yet. But as they had children and the children are born, then they come out blind spiritually. But God does his master act of master powerful spiritual deliverance on Calvary. And still, a couple thousand years later, all men are still not able to see the spiritual light of Christ and believe in Christ. Such that if you don't send missionaries and go door knocking, and in these days internet teaching and so on, as well as in your church and so on, people don't even see the light. And when some of them are shown the light, they still don't believe. But the devil does one act and blinds every man on earth. But God does his master act and cannot accomplish a more powerful thing than Satan accomplished in his one act. The devil is more powerful than God. The devil did one act and blinded all men, put them into spiritual death. But God, according to you New Testament believers, did a redeeming act in Genesis 3:21 by supposedly killing an animal, which would then be a sacrifice to clear up their sin. And the sacrifice is too weak compared to the powerful death that Satan did when he caused them to fall. So in the garden, the devil and God did an act. One, he made them eat from fruit, killed everybody, blinded everybody. But God did his own act of supposedly killing an animal and cannot bring them out of death and blindness. So now he supposedly killed an animal in the garden and that didn't work. So now God had to kill his son on Calvary. That still don't work because people still don't believe in Christ. They don't believe in whatever. And even Hebrew Israelites, a lot of them still don't believe they're Israelites. So you're still not able to reach those ones. And you're spending money, paying for websites, money, paying for radio time to broadcast on radio and TV as well. And you still can't reach Israelites you want to reach in the numbers you want to reach. So the devil's work is more powerful than God's work. And since God will still fail in Jesus to reach everybody he wants, to bring them back to spiritual life and truth, he's going to have to send Jesus to come, like in Isaiah, with his garment, blood red eyes and blood dripping from his garments, killing from the east all the way over to the west, slashing and killing them. Because everything God tried to do through Jesus has failed, so now he just has to kill everybody he can get his hands on with his sword. Resorting to the same sword that the Romans used to kill the Hebrews that fled from them in Jerusalem in AD 70. Resorting to the same sword in the hand of Jesus, coming back with 10,000 of his saints. The same kind of sword killing from the east to the west by prophecy, like the Romans used when they used their sword to kill people, indigenous people, as they traveled on ships across the earth. That's what God has to resort to. So God don't have any better way to solve the problem on earth than just to kill. No wonder he showed up with a sword, angel with flaming sword, when he kicked them out. Because God met a problem that Satan created when he told him to eat from the fruit. God met a problem there in Eden that he could not solve. So he just had to pull out a sword and put some fire on it. Cherubims with flaming sword. God said, just kick him out and bar them. Don't let him come back in because I can't fix this one. God cannot fix the problem that the devil created because God is not as powerful and smart as the devil. Last verse. 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 16. And without controversy, great is the mystery of godliness. Sure, it's great, of course, because the devil could do something in Eden that God is struggling to fix even till today. But great is the mystery of godliness. God was manifest in the flesh. So God was in Jesus. So that makes Jesus God. That's what they taught us from the New Testament. Justified in the spirit, seen of angels, but not seen by all the kings of the earth, not seen by all the people of the earth, so they can say, aha, I'm going to do that. Because you see, when the kings of the earth, the rulers of the earth are meeting together to discuss war, if they're going to go and attack a country because they want oil, or because the people there are killing their own people, or because of climate this, or whatever they're doing, everybody can see and watch them and read of them in the newspaper and see and know that these are the presidents and so on, that we all know ruling in all our countries. So they can say, okay, I agree with it. If it sounds good, I agree with it. Let's go and do this together. But God cannot present himself to all the people of the earth so that people can decide, yeah, this is the creator. I agree with Calvary. I will accept this salvation. No, he is seen of angels, but not necessarily by men, just the men who were at Calvary on that day. So he is seen of angels, preached unto the Gentiles, believed on in the world, received upon. So you see, the world he is believed by is just the world that was present, the few that were present in Palestine at the time. And then you got to print books and send your missionaries to tell the others, who can't accept it because they didn't see it for themselves. You're telling me some ancient shaman who knew nothing about Calvary and power in Jesus and so on, who for thousands of years his people had taught him to be shamans as well, and there's a long line of shamans, And that's all they know to trust in, and it helped them heal their bodies because they know the fruits to pick and whatever, and they just live a nice life like that. Until Jesus came to bring a sword into their villages. But these shamans, for example, you're going to tell me that the Creator did not show them Jesus or let them witness it, and they're just going to believe you? No, they're not going to just believe your Jesus died for their sins. First of all, they're going to ask you, what is sin? So God is not convincing them through Jesus. The point is that the kings of the earth, or their delegates, did not witness anything that happened on Calvary, so there is no official stance from the kings, the rulers of the earth today, all over the earth, who can officially say the Creator sent His Son to die for all of us on Calvary. And we agree with that. They cannot. Because the kings of the earth were not there to witness this. People witnessed Calvary happen, if it did, who were living in Palestine at that time only. Jesus' death was local in Palestine. Jesus' presence was local in Palestine. Jesus' presence was local in Jerusalem, in that spot of Israel. Jesus' presence was not worldwide. He never went worldwide. So you'll have a few books here and there that don't get much respect worldwide that say he traveled over to America and he traveled to India and so on. There's a little bit thing like that, but they don't get as much respect as the New Testament does. Why? Because nobody takes even that seriously. Jesus' presence was just local in that spot of Israel, not worldwide. So the other kings and rulers and chieftains of the earth don't even know that Jesus died for them. You get some chieftain running a little small group of people up in a hilltop somewhere. Some people living in some bushes in a wilderness or in some caves in a forest and so on. They've never heard that Jesus died for them. Because the rulers and the people all over the earth got no message from God that somebody should come and die for them and that they should receive Him. The New Testament is fake.